Hi there, welcome to my session. I'm Lance King and my session today is called Students Who Thrive Under Lockdown. So an interesting topic I've been researching recently. But before we begin, how's your lockdown been? Because mine's been great. Now, I don't mean to insult anyone who's had a really tough 18 months, and I know some of you, this has been the hardest 18 months of your entire working life, and my heart goes out to you. I know that this has been really tough for some people, and you've had to struggle and you've had to do things that you never thought you might have to do. And you have my sympathy and you have my admiration for the work that you've managed to pull out all around the world. But in my case, it's actually been quite positive. I mean, prior to the COVID pandemic, I was travelling for 25 years to exotic destinations, delivering my courses to students and parents and teachers. And as soon as the pandemic hit, March 2020, we went into lockdown. My entire working life just ended overnight. I haven't delivered a single course since March 2020. And some other interesting things have come about as a consequence of that. You know, for the last 25 years, I've had absolutely no routine in my life. I've had no work routine, no home routine, no routines of any kind. And since March 2020, my life is full of routines. I now have a work routine, I have an eating routine, I have an exercise routine, I even have a dog walking and working in the garden routine. And it's really fascinating to see how I've adapted to a completely different lifestyle. It's been great, probably difficult for my wife more than me, because this is the longest time she's ever had me at home in the 32 years that we've been married. But we both seem to be coping pretty well. Since last year, I've also been working on a platform called LALATAT, which stands for Learning About Learning and Thinking About Thinking. And it's a platform of ATL skills and 21st century skills. But the thing is, it's an enormous platform. It's got hundreds of pages, and there's absolutely no way I could have put in the work required to get that platform up and available were it not for the pandemic. So it's been a really positive experience. Like you, I'm sure, I turned all my lessons initially into an online experience. I made a complete set of videos of my 12-hour ATL course, and I marketed it and delivered it, but only delivered it twice, because I have to say I really didn't enjoy that experience. And what I mean by that is, although I got good feedback from the participants, I didn't feel like I really could tell whether there was any engagement. I'm sure you've had exactly that same experience. And I realized finally that how much of the effectiveness and enjoyment of my courses comes out of the emotional engagement I can get with an audience, and reading that audience on a minute by minute basis and adjusting the content to suit the people I'm delivering to. How much of the effectiveness of my courses was based on that interaction, and how that was virtually completely lost in an online environment. So I stopped my online delivery of my ATL course. I only did it twice, and then I canned it and decided that I would be better to wait until I could once again deliver my courses live. So that's the position I'm in, and I'm very lucky. I'm sure all of you have not been that lucky. You have had to soldier on. You've had to design good, engaging learning experiences for your students. You've had to find great resources. And I imagine when you started, you were probably not that good at it, but you got better at it. And I imagine you've produced, in the last 18 months, you've produced some average lessons and some good lessons and some great lessons. And that's wonderful. That's an excellent thing to do, to get practice in, because it is a whole new set of skills, isn't it? And I imagine that your students have been kind of the same. They've had to get used to the online environment, they've had to find good resources, and they've had to learn to work by themselves. And I imagine that some students have been really bad at that. It's been really tough for a lot of students, really difficult for them to reach the same levels of learning as they learnt that they reached in school. But I imagine there's some students that you've had contact with who've done pretty well. And I also imagine that there are some students who've done brilliantly. Would that be true? Because those are the students that I'm interested in talking about. And those are the students I call students who thrive under lockdown. So, what is the data on the effects on education of the pandemic? All the references I'm about to give you and all throughout this presentation are contained in a separate document which is attached to this presentation. So you're welcome to go download that document and check out all the references. So according to good sources, 1.6 billion children in 200 countries have been affected by the COVID pandemic. And from The Lancet, a very reputable magazine, they state that the closure of schools has negatively impacted over 91% of the world's student population. And according to the OECD, this has resulted in an expectation for the current students of a 10% loss in education, which will consequently result in a 3% lower lifetime career earnings. It's a bit grim, isn't it? And if you translate that into a national data, then in the United States they are expecting a 1.5% loss in GDP until 2100, which will result in a $14.2 trillion loss effect on the future economy. And as we know, the most important thing is, listen to Boris Johnson on this.
We all know that the education of our children is so important that the greater risk now is keeping them out of school for a day longer. The
greater risk now is keeping them out of school for even a day longer. And this is interesting because it's almost in opposition to a document produced in the UK, the State of the Nation 2020, Children and Young People's Wellbeing, which stated that children and young people aged 5 to 24 generally responded with resilience to changes in their lives between March and September 2020. And despite indications of challenges to their mental well-being, they report stable levels of happiness and only slight reduction in satisfaction with their lives. So it's kind of interesting to find that the majority of students haven't suffered in the pandemic at all. Of course, that's not talking about their education. So what data can we find around the world about this? I'm about to do something which is terrible on an online presentation. I'm about to read from a page, but I've got a lot of references here about possible positive effects of the COVID pandemic, and I just want to read out a few of these statements from around the world. A survey of 1,000 13 to 14-year-old students in 17 secondary schools across the southwest of England showed the percentage of girls at risk of anxiety and depression dropped from 54% in October 2019 to 45% by May 2020 after 2 months in lockdown. The percentage of boys similarly at risk also dropped from 26% to 18% over the same time period. The students who felt least connected to school before the lockdown saw the largest decrease in anxiety. At the University of Essex, data from 5,500 parents found that around a quarter of the parents reported that their relationship with their children had improved since the government introduced its stay-at-home policy. A separate study of more than 1 million pupils in the UK and Ireland found that children read more books during lockdown, and the books were more challenging than pre-lockdown. The University of Dundee backed that up by finding out that during the lockdown overall, pupils were tending to read longer books of greater difficulty and with greater comprehension. The National Literacy Trust surveyed 58,000 pupils aged 9 to 18 and found an improvement in the number of children enjoying reading from 48% pre-lockdown up to 56% post-lockdown. At least 4 large-scale research studies conducted in the spring of 2020, 2 in the US, 1 in the UK and 1 in Norway, found that children's mental health improved during the early months of the COVID-endured school closures. Collectively, they revealed that children and teens felt less anxious, less depressed, and psychologically stronger following lockdown than in the months prior. In one study from Canada, more than 1/4 of Canadian children 9 to 15 enjoyed remote learning, enjoyed freedom from school, from social pressures, from commitments. They had more time to play, to pursue their own interests, to play with pets in nature, to roam, more independence, more quality time with friends and family. Parents have shared stories about introverted children who relished the solitude and quiet of the pandemic, kids with learning or social challenges who suddenly blossomed, and children who have gained independence by using downtime to get out and explore urban and rural places. From Canadian teachers, pre-COVID, one boy in particular, the class clown, was a persistent challenge, and his behaviour negatively influenced his 23 classroom peers. During the coronavirus closures, the same boy was thriving. Not having those everyday distractions in school has really allowed for kids like him to focus on the work and not necessarily all the social things going on around him. US teachers are reporting that a handful of their students, shy kids, hyperactive kids, highly creative kids, are suddenly doing better with remote learning than they were in the physical classroom. From UK teachers, students who normally do not stand out, children who sit in lessons and neither put their hand up to answer questions nor cause any disruption or distraction. These are the students who've become the true stars of remote learning. They prefer to learn by waiting patiently for instructions, then quietly getting on with them. And a specific case of children on the autism spectrum. A study from Spain showed that most of the families of children with ASD observed a change in the emotional state of their child during lockdown. Parents reported that their children were happier, calmer, with improved communication, improved relationships, emotional responses, and they participated more often in family routines. From parents of autistic children, my second grader thrived during remote learning. In the last 3 months at home, he's moved up several reading levels, improved his writing stamina, and conquered fractions. An August 2021 study at the University of California showed that 40% of parents of children with autism didn't want to send their kids back to school. In China, students struggling academically benefited most when schools transitioned from classroom teaching to online learning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the switch also didn't negatively impact higher achievers. And one of the most important findings I've found is that of the students polled in several surveys internationally, only 28 to 38% report that they prefer full-time in-person school to remote e-learning. Only 28 to 38% want to go back. That's an interesting stat, isn't it? And something maybe we need to take notice of. Here is an infographic from Canadian students and parents showing some of the things that those children have become involved in because of spending more time at home and more time with their family. And they're all positive. There's lots and lots of positive outcomes. So think about your own students that you have in your class on a daily basis, or you did before the pandemic anyway, and some of you are back to that situation now. Are any of your students the kind of students who are in a normal classroom situation, who are overstimulated, who are easily distracted by other students? Are any of them hyperactive and they find it very difficult to sit still in class? Any of them anxious, tense, nervous at school? Any of them who find in-person social interactions difficult or are socially awkward or a victim of bullying at school? This is a particularly interesting group. I certainly know from my own childhood experience that I suffered a great deal from bullying when I was in secondary school and high school, and I would have loved the opportunity to work at home. I would have really, really loved being able to get on with the work and yet not have to go to school. And I'm sure there's lots of children worldwide who are like that. Who are introverted, who don't like compulsory group work, which much rather work by themselves. Some of them are perfectionists, and some perfectionists are totally intolerant of others. Not all perfectionists, of course, but some are completely intolerant of others and only want to do their own work because they know that they know how to do it best. Children who prefer clear instructions and autonomy. Children who prefer to manage their own time. And children who pre-COVID had an overcommitted weekly schedule. So what are some of the characteristics of these children? Well, according to research, around 20% of the student population fits into this group. And they're the sort of children who don't fit in well with normal school routines, normal school organisation, normal time management, normal being told what to do. At school, they may well present as being introverted or frustrated or bored or unhappy and anxious, and sometimes in opposition to teachers and or teaching methods. They often have great self-management skills left to their own, given a clear task with clear objectives, clear timeframes, clear success criteria, can actually get on and get it completed reasonably well. They thrive in an autonomous learning environment. And most importantly, if you can think of any students that you've experienced who fit into those groups, of course, in a normal school environment, they are underachieving. They're working in a normal in-person environment way below what they could achieve because they just don't fit in well and it doesn't suit their ways of learning. So when you think about it from that point of view, you'll see that post-pandemic, if we make sure that we create an in-school learning environment for all students that includes remote learning, then what will happen is that these children that I've been describing would be able to perform at their very best. And the school would reap the benefits of their improved motivation and improved engagement with learning, which then, if you think about it, could improve the overall student academic performance of the entire student population by up to 20%, just by harnessing the achievement of those otherwise underachievers. And if we look at the methods used for remote learning, they're obviously e-learning methods. Now, is there any good data to show that e-learning can be more effective or more efficient than in-classroom learning? Well, if we look at the IBDP results between 2020 and 2021, the average score went up by 1.68%. And if we look at the pass rate in the IBDP between 2020 and 2021, it went up by 4%, from 85% to 89%. And there is some evidence to show, this is all in the references I've given you, that e-learning can take 40 to 60% less time to achieve the same objectives, can improve retention rate of information by 25 to 60%, and can achieve up to 5 times greater content absorption. Now, these are all fascinating facts, and of course e-learning doesn't necessarily achieve all that. It requires application and it requires brilliant work by teachers to make engaging lessons. But I think it's very revealing to see the statistic from students who have spent a great deal of the last 18 months in lockdown, to find that only 28 to 38%, depending on studies, there's lots of studies amalgamated here, only 28 to 38% actually prefer full-time in-person school to remote learning. So it seems to me that it seems completely obvious that we need a new paradigm for school-wide education worldwide. And it's simply to make provision at school for remote learning in order to capture the achievement of those students who find it to be a preferred way of learning. So this would require some kind of centralised, supervised, independent learning space to be made available in each school. And I'm thinking that, is this possibly a future role for the library? Because as a repository of books, it is becoming less and less useful the more students are using the internet as their main information source. So possibly it could be a very useful, independent, supervised, independent learning space. Or maybe within each classroom, is it possible for teachers to set up one corner, one part of the room at the back, maybe furthest away from the teacher, where students who have proved that they're good at self-managed learning could actually go and manage their own learning successfully? Of course, this would require teachers to build independent e-learning opportunities into every lesson and allow those students to go and do those parts of a lesson in a separate environment, an independent environment. Or maybe teachers rewrite entire lessons as remote e-learning opportunities with obviously consistent learning objectives and clear timeframes, and then offer the choice of remote learning to students who can consistently prove that they can manage their own learning successfully. This then would mean a couple of things. It would mean that those students who are underachieving prior to COVID could actually achieve really well up to their full potential in a normal school environment. But it would also mean, if you've got in any normal class, if you've got a group of students, say 5 or 6 students who've proved consistently that they're very good at independent e-learning and they achieve exactly what you want by themselves given the right guidelines, and they are allowed to move off into an independent learning space to complete their work, then what that does is effectively, of course, reduce the number of students in the classroom who are in direct teacher-centred learning, in a teacher-centred learning situation. And maybe even within one class, you could have 2/3 of the class working directly with the teacher and 1/3 of the class in their back corner working independently and remotely. And of course, this then creates an incentive within that class for students to prove that they're effective self-managed learners, because if they prove that, then they get to move to work in that independent learning group. It requires more work from teachers, but what it will result in is actually reducing the teaching load for teachers. Worth thinking about, I think. But certainly some of the lessons of COVID pandemic that all schools need to take into account, and I think prioritise for the 2021 to 2022 year, is that teachers need comprehensive training in the design of engaging independent remote learning lessons. It's specific training, it's very, very precise training, and I'm sure everyone's got good at it already, but there are some training design features that could be incorporated into normal potential professional development from here on for teachers, because it's going to be the key skill, it seems to me. And of course, teachers need to be very familiar with every single website that is useful in their subject, both subject and process websites, and need to communicate those with all other teachers so everyone's using the best possible resources, which also means that schools need to be prepared to budget for paying for good subscription sites, because there are lots and lots of sites available, but some of them are subscription sites, and they need to be part of a normal budget round. And students, of course, need training in all the key ATL skills of successful, independent, remote, self-managed learning. So then we've got to think, what are those skills? Well, from a student's point of view, in order to be a good self-managed learner, one of the first things students have to learn how to do is manage their time and tasks effectively. And there's whole systems of time and task management that students need to practice and become familiar with. They've got to learn how to self-motivate, which is all about overcoming procrastination, using strategies to generate urgency and specific strategies for perseverance. They've got to be able to set up their home study environment to advantage them as learners, to eliminate distracting features, to actually set the environment up so it encourages them to focus in on tasks, to learn how to concentrate when they need to and eliminate distractions. They've got to be good at creating and maintaining digital collaborations with other students, to learn from and with other students, and also to form study groups to boost everyone's performance. They need to be good at writing goals, setting goals, and achieving goals. It's all very well to learn how to write goals, but learning how to actually put in place the strategies to achieve goals is a whole nother set of skills. They need to be good at self-assessment. I think personally that self-assessment has got to be the most important skill for any student to ever learn. In other words, how to accurately judge the quality of their own output is going to be the most important skill for all future careers and all future education. So learning how to self-assess accurately has got to be part of the package, which includes how to learn from mistakes and how to do what I call fail well. Of course, researching, effective searching and researching, choosing appropriate media, recognising media perspectives and bias, and a full understanding of IP rights referencing, bibliographies and copyright. How to summarise key points in a written form or any form from written and visual video sources, and how to develop good quality evidence-based arguments and then present them to any audience. That to me is a skill set which every student needs, and in order to assist with that, what I've done within my platform Lalatat, which stands for Learning About Learning and Thinking About Thinking, which you can find at lalatat.com, I've created created a free portal of all those skills strands, and all we have exercises, 63 different exercises that anyone can access entirely for free. Simply by going to lalatat.com and clicking on that, what you can see on the screen there, that remote learning icon. You get the access to the full platform for all your teachers and all your students forever, for no cost. You also get a training package from me that includes workbooks and spreadsheets and up to 4 hours training. I say up to because I don't know how long the tasks will take. There's an 80-minute video that goes with it that includes 4 hours of tasks in how to design and implement your own core skills or ATL skills of self-managed learning program. So please do access that. That's the icon or the badge or the portal that you will find once you're on the platform. So have a look at that and please access it and enjoy it. So the new paradigm, the new purpose for all schooling, from my point of view anyway, is the development of self-managed learners. That to me has got to be the critical skill set for all future education, for university, for in-house training, for every educational opportunity in the future, and also the key skill set for all enterprise and all careers. So how do we achieve that? Well, first, we've got to make sure that we're teaching all students all the ATL skills of self-managed learning. And as I've shown you, that portal is available. You can use that. Oh, and one thing about that is that students can actually do the work to learn and practice all these skills in the Lalatat portal. They can learn those skills remotely. They don't actually need teacher input in order to complete the training. So that's worth keeping in mind. Next, we've got to make sure that once they've learnt the skills of self-managed learning, that opportunities are created by teachers for students to practice those skills in all their school subjects. And what that in turn means is that it seems to me that as students progress through school, it would be really, really useful if they were allowed increasing levels of self-management as they progress, so that self-management itself becomes one of the key measurable goals for all students at school. And what we're trying to do is to turn students into someone like this. This is one of my favourite cartoons. I'll take you through it here. It's quite amusing, but I think it has a lot of worth in it. Here we've got a funny little guy in the top left-hand panel, and he's accumulated too many things in his head, and his head's getting really cluttered in the second panel. In the third panel, he's getting very confused. And in the fourth panel at the top there, I decided it was time for a good clean-up. So I emptied it all out of my head and pushed it up in a long heap to sort it all out. In other words, he's pushed all his thoughts and his ideas and his images and his fears and his visions. He's emptied them out of his head and he's built them into a pile on the floor, and he's going to sort his own thinking out. There it was. We're in the bottom line now. There it was, everything that was me, all in a big jumbled heap. I walked around it. What a mess. Then suddenly I saw it in silhouette and realised what it was. It was a heap, a simple heap. You don't sort it out, you climb it. You climb it because it's there. And excitedly I clambered to the summit and raised a flag. I was now looking beyond everything that I knew. Now I use this with students quite a lot, because where are we now? In the second to last picture there, bottom row. So what we've got is a metaphor of someone who is standing on everything that they know. So what are they looking at? The only thing they're going to be able to see is everything that they don't know. And how do they describe that view? The view was simply magnificent. And that's the kind of learner we're trying to produce in school, surely. And it's an interesting metaphor, isn't it? Because what it suggests is that the only thing you're really getting by becoming more and more educated is a higher pile to stand on. And the other thing is that when you're standing on a higher pile, what is the only thing that actually gives you? Well, all it gives you is a better view. So in other words, the built-in message here is the more that you know, all that really gives you is a better appreciation of all that you don't know. I love this cartoon. It's by an Australian cartoonist named Michael Leunig. I encourage you to look up his cartoons. They're all fabulous, but this is the one that's most pointed for our needs. So that kind of learner is exemplified by this little video clip here I've got from Tokyo International School of children at the PYP level. Just think about that questing, inquisitive, skills-based learner. And watch this quick video here.
At TIS, we don't just learn, we learn how to learn. Our teachers teach us how to be independent, lifelong learners. We learn how to communicate, socialize, manage ourselves, think critically, and to research. We call these lifelong learning skills approaches to learning.
So what we're learning is how to make predictions, and how we're learning is by taking turns, looking at the person who's speaking, and nodding and making comments to show that you're listening. Are we ready to read?
Yes.
Off we go.
Our classroom is clearly labeled and organized so we can find our own resources. She uses pictures as success criteria.
I'm not going to tell you the materials that you need. I want you to pop your eyes on the board and I want you to count on your
This
fingers.
allows English language learners to use them too. This promotes organization skills. Our teacher often shares our learning intention as questions.
Okay guys, how can we take notes effectively? Does anyone have any ideas?
This provokes us to think and helps us to self-regulate our learning.
So recently we've been talking about lots of different thinking skills that we can use in our classroom to help us have really successful, really rich conversations about our learning.
So what do you think of that? I've always been impressed by this. Quite a few videos from Tokyo International School on YouTube, and I've always been impressed at the development of metacognition that they have achieved with these students. They're aware of how they're thinking and they're aware of how they're learning while they're learning, and that's quite an achievement. What they're doing is they're in the literature these days, such a learner is called an expert learner. And there are three characteristics of the expert learner. The first is metacognitive awareness, helping develop students who are aware constantly not only of what they learn but how they learn. They are reflecting on the efficiency and effectiveness of the processes they are using, and they're adjusting their thinking and learning strategies to suit. They're evaluating outcomes and they're able to make process changes as necessary. And the reason they can make those process changes is because they're very strategic. They have learnt what you might call a library of process skills that they can draw on. They're constantly developing new skills and strategies, and they're trying out different processes for different learning tasks. And they are self-managed. So given clear outcomes, given success criteria, given time frames, given all the parameters necessary, they can actually organise their own resources and their own work, and they can meet all those objectives independently. And of course, in order to do that, they have to have lots of opportunities to practice those three skill areas. So just to sum up, the title of this conference is Unlocking the Next Paradigm, and it seems to me it's got several key components to it. In a post-pandemic world, I think number one, we have to make sure that we're making provision for remote learning in school for all students. We have to teach all students all the key ATL skills of self-managed and remote learning. We have to make sure those skills are practiced and developed in all subject classes, and we have to increase the opportunities for well-structured self-managed learning across the whole school. We have to allow students more choice in how they learn, so that those that have proved that they're expert learners, that they're brilliant in self-management, are given the opportunity to do so as often as possible. And we have to make the development of self-managed or expert learners one of the key goals, the key outcomes of all levels of schooling. Because it seems to me that if we focus on making sure that students, by the time they finish at our schools, by the time they leave grade 12 or year 13, if we ensure that every one of those students is a brilliant self-managed learner, then I think we've done our the best possible job as a teacher that we could do. In other words, we've made ourselves completely redundant, and we've provided them with exactly the right skill set for success in all future education, all future careers, all future industry and commerce. I think we've done the best possible job. As expert teachers, our aim is, of course, to make ourselves redundant. Thank you. I'll be opening the session up for Q&A now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.